Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Tuesday, November 21st, and it's day 46 since October 7th. Thank you to everyone who either watched online or attended last night's prayer vigil in front of the White House in Lafayette Park last night in Washington, D.C. We had several hundred people register, and a number of those joined us. It was a really powerful time to be able to be together. We prayed and felt that our prayers were intercession, beseeching God, and also calling on the U.S. government and President Biden to support a ceasefire. You might have seen his op-ed this weekend where he said that he absolutely would not support a ceasefire, and we're hearing confirmation of that from U.S. government officials. And we, as U.S. citizens and as people who vote, and have to say that's not good enough. And so thank you for supporting that. We had dozens of organizations that sponsored the event. Our next gathering will be Monday evening, again in Washington, D.C. So if you have thought about coming to D.C., consider joining us for Monday evening, December 11th. We would love to have you. You probably have heard that churches in Bethlehem and churches in Jordan and in other parts of the Middle East are canceling Christmas. They'll have their services worshiping and acknowledging the birth of Christ, but they won't be celebrating because they want to stand in solidarity, certainly with Christians in Gaza, but also with the civilians there. And so we're going to do a service of lament in Washington, D.C. on December 11th. So more information about that, you can go to our website, www.cmep.org. I wanted to let you know that our Advent prayer chains are ready. And so we've been talking about this. We started our Monday community calls with Congress. There's a QR code that you just click on with your phone, and then you fill out a little form, and it tells you who your members of Congress are. And for Advent, as a spiritual discipline and as a social action, we are asking people to take just a minute or two a day to call your elected officials, call for a ceasefire, immediate and adequate humanitarian assistance, and release of hostages. And you can find out information about that on our website. We're hoping a lot of our churches will hang the prayer chains, our Advent ceasefire prayer chains, that you'll hang them in the hanging of the greens, which I know is coming up very, very soon. So if your church is interested in that, please let us know. You can email us at info@cmep.org, and that information is on our website as well. I did want to give you some updates in terms of what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in Israel. The big news is the potential of this hostage deal. We'd heard about this Wednesday a week ago, and then Saturday, the Washington Post reported that it was going to proceed. Sunday morning, I at least heard on Reuters that it was not going to move forward. Someone told me that all happened on Twitter before it was announced in the news. But the emerging deal is expected to include the release of 50 hostages in exchange for 150 Palestinian prisoners. The far-right ministers Ben-Gvir and Smotrich in Israel oppose the hostage deal. Minister Sa'ar is undecided, and the Shas leader says that the ultra-Orthodox party in Israel is going to vote for the deal. So as of a few hours ago, the Israeli War Cabinet was meeting to decide whether or not they were going to accept the proposal. It would release 50 hostages in exchange for 150 Palestinian prisoners, and it also would include 4 days of a ceasefire. Netanyahu has said that as a part of the hostage deal, the Red Cross would have to also visit hostages that were not yet released. They would do health assessments, and supply medicine as well. It's also believed and expected that hostages that would be released would be mostly children, according to a source. In the middle of those conversations, the Israeli Defense Forces, they're continuing their ground operation in Gaza. 2 Israeli soldiers were killed just in the last day or so. We have significant concerns about the ground incursion proceeding into South Gaza, where now the majority of the Palestinian population is located. There have been pamphlets that have been distributed calling on Palestinians to again evacuate, which they have already done, once or twice or even more times. The death toll numbers have not been able to be updated according to OSHA, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. But according to Haaretz, the numbers in Israel are 1,200 civilians and soldiers. I believe I told you that those numbers a week or so ago, maybe it's 2 weeks now, were decreased from 1,400 to 1,200. And the number of dead in Gaza, according to the Hamas-controlled health ministry, is 14,128 dead in Gaza, with more than 4,500 of those being children. According to CNN, they just issued some maps, and I hope we can provide these links for you, but they are saying that according to satellite data, up to 50% of buildings in North Gaza have been damaged in 6 weeks of war. This was research that was done by City University of New York and Oregon State University. They're saying that 20% of all buildings in the entire Gaza Strip are likely damaged. About roughly 20,000 buildings are likely damaged in North Gaza, which equates to about 40 to 50% of the governance buildings. In the Gaza Governorate, which is the home to the enclave's capital of Gaza City, 24,000 to 31,000 buildings are likely to have been damaged by the fighting, which is just an exorbitant number. I mean, when you hear up to 50% of buildings in North Gaza and the Gaza Governorates have been damaged, one of the thoughts is, where are people going to live? And winter is just around the corner. And so grave concerns about the weather turning cold. We're still having severe humanitarian issues, which have not been adequately addressed at all. There was a source that reported that there is hope that if the hostage deal goes through, that aid will be able to increase into the Gaza Strip. The goal, according to this source, is that they are working toward a goal of 400 trucks a day. And one of our big questions, and we are saying this repeatedly on Capitol Hill, we're saying this with the White House, we're saying with this to the State Department, why is the United States government not up in arms by the fact that 2+ million people in Gaza still don't have water, still don't have adequate gas, still don't have electricity? And why was it okay that it was cut off in the first place? And why, has that not been remedied after 6 weeks? OSHA is not reporting numbers because of their communication blackout, but we know that food insecurity continues to be a significant issue. In the north of Gaza, people are waiting in line for 4 to 6 hours to get half a portion of bread. It was only 6 days ago that the first fuel trucks were allowed into Gaza, and I talked about that. The first fuel trucks were limited so that the fuel could only be used for transportation. My understanding is that that restriction on fuel has been lifted, but it is still inadequate. And, when we're talking to the US government and they're saying, well, we're supporting humanitarian pauses, our response is, why do we need humanitarian pauses in the first place? People should not be cut off from water. So on November 18th, this is according to UNRWA, the UN Refugee Agency, Israeli authorities authorized the entry of 120,000 liters of fuel that would be used over 2 days. And that covers only half of the daily critical needs. It's not clear to me if that's half of the daily critical needs of only UNRWA, because it's an UNRWA report, or of all of Gaza. But UNRWA has been informed that that amount, 120 liters of fuel, will be delivered every 2 days. According to UNRWA's statistics, on November 18th, a couple of days ago, 30 aid trucks were allowed into Gaza. And then on the 19th, 69 trucks were allowed in. Let me just remind you, before October 7th, it was nearly 500 trucks a day. We're told more than 500 trucks a day, 5 days a week was needed to prevent malnutrition and to have adequate needs met. And that was when the water was turned on. That was when there was not, indiscriminate bombing and thousands of people who had been displaced. The 500 trucks number was the goal when Gaza was not suffering bombardment and was not suffering the consequences, of a major battle and campaign against it. So we keep having 500 as a goal, but 500 was the baseline before this war even began. And as of November 19th, according to UNRWA, the total number of aid trucks that had entered into Gaza through Rafah, Egypt, was only 1,268 trucks. That is less than the total number of trucks for 3 days, over 6 weeks, 3 days. Less than 3 days of trucks have been allowed into Gaza, which is just abhorrent. And according to these numbers, UNRWA reports only 200 of those trucks were UNRWA trucks carrying food, water, and medical supplies or other essential non-food items. So I just wanted to let you know, on one hand, we feel like God is so at work. We see we see people's hearts being changed. And I mean, like, broken for Palestinians, for Israelis, calling for hostages to be released, calling for hospitals in Gaza to have adequate supplies. Like, on one hand, we see things moving, and on the other hand, things are so incredibly desperate, and we're just not making progress fast enough. And when we hear reports from groups like Defense for Children International that say a child in Gaza dies every 10 to 15 minutes, that is just so abhorrent, and that we're at risk of severe waterborne illnesses and pregnant mothers, dying or not being able to give birth to healthy babies, and people dying in hospitals because of not having anesthetic or electricity where surgeons are able to operate. I mean, the situation in Gaza is just catastrophic, and every moment matters. So please, 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 we don't have to wait till Advent to start calling our members of Congress. Those QR codes that are available on our website, they work right now. And so we can start calling them every day right now. So call your members of Congress, call for a ceasefire, a release of hostages, immediate and adequate humanitarian aid. Let President Biden know that humanitarian pauses shouldn't be necessary in the first place, and they certainly are not good enough. And so let's continue to work towards peace and an end to this horrific bombing of Gaza and the war between Israel and Hamas.